Panel discussion. We've got all of our conference speakers up front and center. Now I'm going to stand and rove. So that is the empty chair. The empty chair has a purpose. In this fishbowl discussion, the empty chair will be utilized thus. So we're going to throw out a question to the group, and they're going to come up with some answers or some suggestions or some discussion around that question. And then we're going to go to the audience for questions. And if someone in the audience has a further comment to attach on to the previous discussion or a current discussion, then that audience member will be invited to come up and be part of the panel and continue the discussion. Did I get that right? Yep. All right, great. Okay. So to lead things off, the first question is one that I came up with, and while I was sitting there listening to all the presentations, there was a lot of material covered and a lot of interesting stuff that went by. But one of the things that I was wondering about was performance and capacity testing or load testing. That was a subject that really wasn't hit on a lot. I know Ron touched on it a little bit, but I have a team where I work that we have a very agile environment. We use card walls, we have weekly iterations and that sort of thing. We have stand-ups, retrospectives, etc., continuous integration. One of the things that this team is struggling with is load and capacity testing. One of the things is they just built the system based on the cards, pleasing to the customer and everything, except that it's a batch process that takes way too long to run, and so they've got a big time capacity problem, and what that's caused is they have to go back to the beginning of the process and try and figure out exactly where it went wrong and how to make it faster and more efficient. So this is just an example of something that can happen. So how do we address these sorts of things, not just in an agile environment, and in general, as a testing approach? Where does it fit in? Can it be done on an acceptance test driven development model somewhere earlier in the process? Just, you know, based on the discussions that we've already had today, how do we apply that to this particular problem?
So if I sum up the question, you're asking where does performance testing fit in an agile development environment?
Right. It's a problem, it's a challenge. How does it fit not just in agile, but based on what we've already talked about today? How do we address that?
So I think the first thing that we have to accept is that performance has to be built in. It can't be added on. So having said that, performance testing isn't something you do at the end to see if you have proper performance. Performance testing is something you do from the beginning and you continue to do through each of your iterations. So it can happen at several levels. One, there's tools based on your technology stack that the team can use, and they can run some performance tests on their development environment overnight. And they can check things like memory consumption, hotspots in the code, etc. And they can do that on a nightly basis. But generally, the equipment that they use, if it's in a large enterprise, doesn't allow the kind of performance testing or demand that you would place on a system that might be in production. For example, we had a system that went in production that had 18,000 agents that were going to use it every day. What's that? Oh, sorry. So we do have specialized performance environments that we do automated performance testing against. Now the reason we want to do performance testing daily is because we're making changes to the code frequently, and it's far easier to come up with an explanation of why performance all of a sudden changed significantly if you run those tests frequently, because you can then relate it back to, well, what changed, okay? It also provides that feedback loop to the team that, this process, which is supposed to take 2 seconds, is taking 2 minutes. We have some technical debt. We need to address it. So performance testing can be done by the team to a limited degree. if you have a large-scale application, you do need a production-like environment in which you have automated tests that you run on a continuous basis. So with that, I'll pass it on.
Well, I want to add to that you do it every day. I like the acceptance test-driven approach because you put in the criteria. The key pieces to have there are the environment, the data, and the dependencies. So there are tools available to help you simulate dependencies where they're not available, and there are also tools available to help you assemble all of your test data, run the necessary de-identification algorithms. So you put those together, and then you've got an environment that makes it possible for you to do daily performance testing.
I agree.
Nothing to add?
The only thing I'd add is, again, to my discussion about the cloud, where your question about, gee, do we have the capacity internally to run these tests, and is that going to backlog everything? That's where, again, that elasticity of demand, elasticity of scale model fits in very, very nicely, because you can offload or quote-unquote outsource those tasks to a service provider, to an infrastructure that can scale up to massive levels. So fitting that in, so what you can do is kind of say, okay, I know how many tests I need to run, so therefore I'm just going to run it. Now, I think everybody else's kind of answers, where does that fit in the overall Agile process from there?
Anonymizing the data and, any of the sensitive data, but maintaining referential integrity among the tables and stuff. That's one technique. There are lots of different other ways to do that sort of data analysis and mapping your data set. If you are doing performance testing is its own thing, like very highly technical. I would suggest if you do it, you don't dabble in it. You go whole hog, get some people who really know what they're doing. Profile everything, roll up where it hurts, make sure your data matches, all those great things about performance testing.
Those kind of people are difficult to find, are they not?
And expensive too. Yeah, I'm hireable. No, I'm kidding. And yeah, they're expensive and difficult. So you have to do the buy versus build kind of analysis to figure out, is it really worth going somewhere and getting that level of load testing? I mean, if you're doing a website, there are like 50,000 different tools out there that'll help you load test your website. If you're doing a web service, there are a gajillion of those. Anything more complicated than something like that, you really need to sit down and analyze it. From my time in my prior role, the guys who did performance testing were all like PhDs in computer science. And you see how well Vista turned out. Kidding, joking. Actually, you see how well Windows 7 turned out, you see how well your Windows Server, and then some of those. Sometimes it can take that level of attention if you do it right. So no, I guess I don't have any one recipe for how you make that data set match, except that you need to take a look at the data set and come up with representative items in your test that match that. Ann wanted to answer as well.
Okay.
What he said.
After Ann answers, we're going to ask the audience for a question then.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. No, I want you to answer.
Well, this is a big challenge, test data. I mean, we're talking about performance testing, but test data is a big challenge for functional testing, for any type usability testing, and you can tackle it at an enterprise level, you can tackle it at a low level, but there are experts out there who can help you with your test data. And I'd encourage any group that's really struggling with this. Jeff pointed out earlier, the biggest faux pas you can do, it's a violation of your customer's privacy to use live customer production data in a test environment. So I'd encourage anybody to look for some of the experts there. As Mark mentioned, there are some tools out there that can help you with it.
Fantastic. Thanks for that answer. By the way, anybody that wants to get a drink like the one I've got that's blue, just go to the bar and ask for a Genovatini, right? Okay. All right, audience, this is your chance. Question for the panel. Don't be shy.
We've talked about different methods of testing, different ideas, tools, etc. Do you have any tools that you utilize that you use for actually tracking other than the I forgot what it's, the quality center? Yeah, is there any other thing you've used? Have you used any other type of tracking products that have been of good universal use?
There are gobs of tools out there for tracking test results. Anywhere from some agile tools like Basecamp, Campfire, that whole set of tools from 37 Signals to Pivotal Tracker to there's one called Agile Tracker or something. It's thousands. Greenhopper. We've actually used internally. Well, we did an evaluation. My team, we set some folks aside to evaluate a set of what we call test case management tools for tracking our test execution and automated test execution and manual test execution all together. We looked at HP Quality Center, we looked at Microsoft Test Manager, and we looked at Test Complete from SmartBear Software. And we fell out on the Microsoft Test Manager side largely for price and compatibility reasons. Our developers already used Team Foundation Server, and it just made sense for us to go ahead and plug our test cases into the same tool the developers are using, and then encourage our BAs to come along with the rest of us. But yeah, there are lots and lots of tools out there that you can use. I've promised my team I wouldn't say this, but you can Google it, and you'll find 1,000 of them.
Use Bing.
Yeah, don't Bing. No, you could Bing. You Bing it. It's an inside joke with us Granger people. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to see if there, we've got a tool we're using, but I was trying to see if there's a different tool, maybe some favored by them and give us some alternative tools.
Well, why don't we can we ask the crowd that? Just, raise your hand. What test tools are you guys using, or test case management systems or the like are you using in your organization? Rational Test Suite, I forgot about that one.
Does anybody use anything different than Rational Test or Quality Center?
There's the whole Mozilla open source.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. And Fog Bugs. Forgot about that one. Come on. There's got to be another one out there. Oh, yeah. There's the other one, version 1. That's the one I was trying to think of. Yeah. And Rally software is another one. Or that is Rally. Rally version 1, right? Are they different? Okay, yeah, there's another one.
And then, of course, the old standby, Excel.
That's the #1 test tool in use today, Excel.
Unfortunately.
Hey, that one's good.
Who else has a question?
Okay, this is not a zinger. I would really want your answer. When do you think the norms in the IT community will evolve in such a way that we truly draw a distinction between quality assurance, all about our processes, continuous improvement, making them better, and quality control or testing? And, I don't want to look like an ideologue or just ivory tower, but guess what? I actually believe quality assurance makes a difference, and we still do most of our talking about testing. So when do you think that'll eventually happen?
I think we have to start locally, and it'll affect globally. Heck, we even named this session the wrong thing, because this has been a session all about test practices. And for folks who aren't familiar with the difference, quality assurance is defect prevention. Quality control is defect detection. Testing is defect detection. So the way you prevent defects is by catching them earlier. And it's a form of testing, but reviews, walkthroughs, inspections. But it's so, so important to track them. And it doesn't matter what tool you use, whether it's the Rational tool or Quality Center, but track them. Keep yourself honest. It's like keeping track of your checkbook. You get your first checkbook and you log everything and you balance to the penny and you know what you're doing, and you get a little sloppy over time and pretty soon you're overdrawn. That's what it's like. So it's so important to promote quality assurance, find your problems early, log them, keep track of them. And I'd ask everybody here who's present is to not call testing QA.
QA is not a verb. You don't QA something. How many times have we been guilty? We say, I'm going to QA this. No, you're not. Maybe you're going to QC it. Maybe you're going to test it. But you're not going to QA it. By no means.
So I think the whole test first movement associated with Agile is really a QA focus. It's really about driving defects to the left. It's really about preventing defects to begin with. And it's about ensuring that defects stay at zero. So I would look at test first thinking, and it drives quality assurance to the analyst, the developer, and the tester in the business, not some separate organization.
I've got a follow-up to Bill's question. Can you talk a little bit about how data and analytics support the QA function? How do you use that to drive that change?
Come on.
That one's all about Ann. What are you doing to me? So one of the first things that we did when we put our QA team together was take a really hard look at our defects. The numbers, where they come from, root cause analysis, what's happening, all that jazz. And I recognize that is only one sliver of the view. The one cool thing about, not the one thing, one cool thing about QA is we do not lack for numbers. If you're a numbers person, you like analyzing and going through pivot tables and what if scenarios and how could this happen and what's going on here, man, we have that in spades. Probably the number one thing we measure is bugs because they're easy to measure. We track them, we keep watch on them. Source code analysis is something we started delving into. Complexity metrics, we started looking at metrics that can help enforce some of the things like single responsibility principle. A method or a subroutine can only be one page, one screen high, anything like that. So there's a lot of stuff. To me, that is definitely a QA activity. Taking a look at those numbers. We actually have set up at Grange, we have monthly what we call our enterprise quality review. And each of the leads on my team prepares a set of reports about the defects that have come in, where the testing, how their testing is doing, code coverage, etc. And we meet with our development, BA, and business leaders in concert all together, plus with the folks from customer support. They bring in some metrics as to what they're hearing from the customers. We all get together once a month. We've got a standard website we go to, stores all of our reports. We click down the reports. Everybody gets a chance to say their piece, and we actually make real decisions based on what we find. So one metric we track internally is number of defects found by our model environment, our test environment and prior, versus the number of defects found in our production environment, found by our customers, or reported by our customers. And we make adjustments to ensure that there are a whole lot more issues being found prior to release than after.
And Mark would probably be in a much better place to explain this because he was part of that team. But in Microsoft, and what we implemented in the field, it was a process called MSF, Microsoft Solutions Framework. And from a data to your question, we were a big driver of the data analysis and the data tracking. Mark mentioned, you do daily builds and you're running your QC part of your testing, and you've got a bug track over time. And we were able to get to the point where you could track and basically extrapolate what your ship date was going to be based on that trajectory of found fixed bug track. So by doing daily builds and by doing the QC function, that would drive the overall QA function. But that's where you were using that analysis and that data part to essentially estimate when you were going to ship it, not necessarily that the executive team wants it here. You basically said, we know when we're going to be at an acceptable bug count. Now, that acceptable bug count is close to zero, but as you know, you can't always get it to zero. So they were able to extrapolate that line down, and that was from the QA piece that was being driven by the QC piece, and to the other question as well.
Just to expand on that for just a sec, I want to explain a little bit. So we had, when I was on the Windows team, we had this concept called zero bug bounce, or ZBB. So we would track how many active bugs there were on every day. And you could see it coming down. And when it hit zero, of course, it would bounce back up because anybody can file a bug. But we knew once we hit zero, meaning our developers were fixing the bugs a whole lot faster than our testers were reporting them. We knew once we hit that spot, we had 6 weeks to go. That was it. We knew we could get done in 6 weeks, and just proved out time over time over time. Now, I don't know if that was a self-fulfilling prophecy of some sort or what, but in retrospect, now I look back on it after having some experience now with acceptance test-driven development and TDD and BDD and all these different methodologies, I'm almost hesitant to use bugs as the key metric. I think you've got to look at them, but I would almost say we overused them at Microsoft. We ended up doing what I like to call DDD, or defect-driven development, where, really the only thing that mattered at the end of the day was the bugs. And, it's great. If something's wrong, you file a bug. That's awesome. You can track through that one pipeline, but it didn't give us the right sort of attitude, I think, about software development. We should have been concentrating on the functionality available or what's working, not necessarily what's broken. I don't know. Anyway, Ann's really done a boatload of work on this around metrics and stuff.
This will probably...
She and Tim, I should say.
Yeah, I have a follow-up. This will probably tee up Ann. I noticed all the answers to now have been focused around verifying code that's been developed, which is a small piece of the overall development cycle, right? And when you're talking about quality assurance, it's a piece that ties it all together. So how do you apply those principles from requirements or concept through implementation, and used statistical analysis techniques to really drive things like correlation, cause and effect, so you know how to advise the business and your development practitioners how to build better software, right? Avoid it, right? I think test-driven development, I was going to say three of the, and I know Ann's not, but CAM's solution, right? That test-driven development really drives towards that, but still the analytics, we lose some data in the agile space because of kind of the resistance to documentation that may even show opportunities for improvement there.
I have to respond to resistance to documentation. So, it is a misperception, I think, that in Agile there isn't documentation. But there is a perception that in Agile there isn't documentation. I would say that Agile has the best documentation you can possibly have, and I say that for the following reasons. If your requirements are described in Gherkin, that is, your scenarios and your acceptance criteria for what something is to do, and if those things can be automated and run daily, you now have living, breathing requirements that are enforceable and will report the health of your product on a daily basis. I don't think it gets any better than that. Requirements written and left will soon be out of sync with what's implemented. When your acceptance criteria are automated, that doesn't happen.
Those are some big ifs, though.
No, I completely agree with that statement. It's more around the error identification, fixing during the development process.
So this is an area that...
Development areas and unit tests, most development areas don't track their unit tests.
So Don's point is that most areas don't track their development errors and their unit test problems. But to Cam's point, when you're really using acceptance test-driven development, you're getting those metrics. We've talked all day long about moving defect identification and resolution to the left. And if you don't log it, you don't know if you've done it. I have two key messages around metrics. One is don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. Pick one or two things you care about and really work with your team so they understand it. Folks are just pummeled with information. Let's say you're an application owner. You're getting questions about your uptime, your availability, your response time, your finances. We may love data and analytics, but be very specific. One or two you want them to look at, so don't overdo it. And the second thing around analytics is be aware of bad behaviors they may drive. When we push people to quotas, we accidentally drive bad behaviors. Let's say we told a group, you need to get your costs down 10% year over year. And we measure it for 3 years in a row. And an easy thing to cut out is training or investment in your infrastructure. But this person, they're hitting their goal 3 years in a row. We get 4 years out, and all of a sudden we find out their staff isn't skilled enough anymore, and they don't have the infrastructure, and they have a big expense to catch up. So the metric was bad. So my warning around using the data and the analytics is be aware of unintended consequences.
Anybody else have a question? This is your chance.
Okay, actually there's two two-piece part to it. One is metrics related, but the other one is the Three Amigos meeting. How do you deal with that situation when you're trying to work for what a like 3 or 5 day piece of work, or 3 day pieces of work coming out of that? How do you deal with that when maybe the business analyst that comes into that meeting really hasn't done the research, the investment into his customers to understand what's going on there, and you end up with a lot of questions coming out that you don't get answers to for a day or 2 days? How do you work the whole schedule with that? And when it comes to that Three Amigos situation, what kind of metrics do you try and track coming out of there to track the fact that you are being effective in doing that?
All right, so in the Three Amigo meeting, I mentioned there's a Three Amigo exit meeting and a Three Amigo entrance meeting, or entry meeting. The Three Amigo exit meeting typically goes the smoothest. It's the furthest down the path. But let's go back to the first one, the entry meeting. If we're in a situation where an analyst doesn't understand the requirements, don't you want to know that before you start development?
Very much so.
Yes. So one of the things that can come out of a Three Amigo entry meeting is we're not ready. We don't know enough, or we have some questions, or we need clarification, or our acceptance criteria aren't anywhere near complete. Go back. Fix this now. Okay? And it's far cheaper to do that before anybody's put down a piece of code. So that's a good thing to find.
Okay. And so in that situation, you really wouldn't start the clock on that piece of work until after you can actually come together and say, now we all three of us understand what's going on. We've got a good scope, a good perspective. Now we can start.
Yes, correct. Those Three Amigos have to say, we have a common understanding. We know what we're supposed to do. We know what done looks like. We can start now. And just a side note, you had mentioned scheduled some meeting. These are low ceremony things. People are sitting together. They grab each other at the board for the next card. It's not getting in and scheduling a meeting, looking for a room, figuring out a particular time of day. That's too much overhead.
Okay. But you really don't start the clock until those three folks have an agreement of, okay, now we grasp it, now we understand, we're ready to go.
As it should be.
All right. And metrics, do you try and track, okay, here are the issues that we uncovered the first time through, or the questions that we had the first time through? Because that's one of the things that we have implemented at the City of Columbus, is to put inspections, reviews in place, and then track all of the missing pieces, elements, so that we can say, by not moving forward with all these unanswered questions, we are preventing problems from later, preventing problems from the assumptions that we would have to make if we were to go forward right now. Go back, answer these questions, bring those answers back, then we move.
So are you getting pushback that you're making the process take too long?
Getting pushback at the lower levels that there's a process at all.
Right. So we implemented something similar, just static reviews, and we started measuring our defect removal effectiveness, or our phase containment effectiveness, because really it's the data proving that it's cheaper to find and fix earlier. And it's taken a couple years to really institutionalize it and get people over the hump of, you're logging a defect against my requirement. No, we're logging a save, because we've saved a defect from happening. So it's a key wording change that really influences the way people behave. And you have to be sure as a management team you're not punishing people for finding defects. You don't want to give them a bad review because you've logged some saves against the requirements. So the management actions are important. And then to log them, it's logging them over time. Because if I send Cam's group requirements that are incomplete and he can't get past the entrance gate, at some point he's going to pass them back to me and say, Ann, you're wasting my time. Fix this. We're going to move on and help another team. You're wasting my time. So what I need to do is understand, where are we repeatedly finding those problems, and then fix our processes, retrain our people, change what we do so that we we can pass things off and they get through Three Amigos.
I have a question to follow up on Scott's question. What happens in the situation when you've got the Three Amigos entry meeting, and you don't have agreement? Say two of them agree that you can move on and the third one doesn't. And by that I mean the BA and the developer agree to move on and the QA person says no, which is always, that's the usual conspiracy that you see. So in other words, instead of being the bad guy at the end of the cycle, which we have in traditional development, you're the bad guy at the beginning of the cycle. So
the QA is the heavy once again, or the tester. I don't want to say QA, right? We're trying to change the culture.
Whatever.
I think the tester in that case is going to state what their objection is. Like if the developer can't tell the tester how they're going to implement the code, then they're not ready to go. That tester can't go off and automate those acceptance tests. And this is situational, of course. What is the objection? What is the tester's objection? What is the problem? And generally, it will be around some piece of information that's missing. For example, this scenario is incomplete. I can't write an effective test unless I have some piece of information. We need that before I give it the approval. So generally, the way the team will respond is, okay, we'll go get that piece of information. That makes sense. It's not, well, you idiot, you're holding this up. We need to get this done, and it's you again. That's not generally the approach of or the response of the team.
Developer says, I can automate that. BA says, I can approve that.
I thought it would help your answer.
So, if you're in a situation where the team is fighting at that level, that will be an issue that will have to be dealt with at the retrospective, and also the leader of that team will have to intervene and pass judgment or dig in to find the details to find out what's going on. Is it really truly done and the tester is being a problem child, or does the tester have valid reason why it's not done? So you got to do some analysis.
Right, assuming you have a leader on the team, right? Okay. Oksana, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question also to Kim. From the practices and analyzing some data from RTC Rational Concert Tool, we found out that sometimes cards are not completed in the iteration when they were planned. So are you guys doing any analysis around those cards and asking questions why and looking at some trends? That's my question.
Yes, we've historically, we've been doing this for a while, so one of the things that we noticed is cards that were most likely to be carried over were cards that were bigger than 3 points. So one of the things that we've done is reduce our cards to 3 points or less. And the incidence of a card being carried over has dropped significantly because of that. So you have to do root cause analysis when something gets carried over. Now, we have some cases where a team was able to pull ahead a card or several cards, and the cards they pulled ahead didn't get done. That's not a problem. That's a good thing. They're that much further ahead in the next iteration.
My question has to do with the Three Amigos meetings and the entrance or whatever. And I'm wondering, would it be beneficial to have a subject matter expert business end user participating that would be able to talk about some of those scenarios that you have on the cards? Would that be significantly improving the cycle that you're talking about?
So the team has a person called the product owner. The product owner represents the business, is the expert in the business, and is the one who prioritizes the product backlog, and is also the one that approves any work that gets done. The product owner sits on the line and is welcome to participate in that Three Amigo meeting. That product owner has spent a significant amount of time with the analyst originally capturing what that story card is going to be, decomposing it, and helping define the acceptance criteria from an analyst perspective. So that person generally is well represented, but that person often is in the room, can often choose to participate, and will often overhear what happens in those Three Amigo meetings.
I think it is important, though, to be aware that the business owner often has actual business stuff to do as well. They're not IT. They're your customer or whatever, so you have to be cautious with their time is all. We've had some pushback. Actually, I'll say this. Our business owners have been unbelievably gracious and fantastic with being involved. but we are very careful to make sure we don't use too much of their time. You don't want to go back to that well one too many times.